Our Hebrew readings this morning is from the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verses 11 through 13 and 20 through 25. God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, of every kind, with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was good. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Hello again, everyone. I was here last week. I'm back here again today. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Vanessa. Marina and I have prepared another selection for you today. This is a gorgeous Spanish art song by composer Carlos Guastavino. The song is La Rosa y la Salsa and describes this beautiful, almost love affair between a rose and a willow. Enjoy.
As I was listening to angelic voice that helped me soar into the ethereal world, I was just noticing how beautiful everything looked. I was looking at the Trinity candles with other 2 candles that we have, with the Thanksgiving decoration. And then I suddenly realized how beautiful these lamps are. You know? And God's creation is like that. If you go to nature, with all the living creatures and wildflowers blossoming spontaneously, unexpectedly, and you experience this gifting of grace, that best thing in life is free. You know, I don't have to work so hard to earn it, to appreciate it. The best things in life are free. Anyway, I'm just looking at how beautiful these lamps are. I feel like Christmas came early or something. It was very beautiful. Well, the beauty and art humanize us when our hearts start to get hardened by the harshness of life, of dog-eat-dog world. And then we become cynical. But when suddenly art enters and we are penetrated and invaded by this art and beauty, we become human again. And that's the beauty and the power of art. Sometimes, in order for us to shift our consciousness, to shift our paradigm, to shift the way we see and understand, they take time. It takes time to make that shift. And that is why I am taking this time for us to really, really appreciate what this is about. Our relationship outside of ourselves with the outer world, with other creatures and natures and things. There is a proverb that I grew up in Korea, and it is, when you dig a well, dig one well. What it means is that, of course, if you try to dig, shallow, you don't get to the living water, the spring water that's way down deep. So if you keep just grazing on the surface, digging on the surface, you'll never get to the source of the spring water. So choose one well and go deep. It's just a way of saying, when you choose something and go deep, what that does is that by going deep, you become a deeper person and you have a deeper knowledge of everything else by choosing one thing and going deep and becoming the best at it. By doing that, you then able to appreciate the depth of everything else because you have gone deep. Well, Richard Powers recently published The Bewilderment, which is shortlisted for National Book Award and the Booker Prize, following his 2019 Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Overtory. That's the cover of the book. The Overtory won the Pulitzer Prize in 2019. And Oprah Winfrey, made the book of the month. And President Obama said that after reading this book, I'll never walk the forest the same ever again. So, Powers' two recent books, The Overtory and The Bewilderment, should be understood as a couplet. The Overtory is about the world beyond us, the slow, powerful life of trees and forests, and the way that all of that impact our planet and us. So you can call The Overtory the outer story, and his recently published book, The Bewilderment, by contrast, is the inner story. But those two should be read as a part one, The Overtory, and part two, Bewilderment. So in the book, The Overtory, I'm going to focus on that, and then next week, I'm going to delve into the bewilderment, the inner journey, and this is the outer journey. So those two books are about how we see the world we inhabit, and whether we even see it. It's about taking seriously the gifts and responsibilities of being alive on planet Earth. It is about expanding our empathy beyond ourselves towards the natural world. It's about how we change our minds and how we therefore change our societies. It is about how we treat delusion as normal and clarity as lunacy. It's not just a book about which Powers have been exploring these ideas. He have been experimenting through enacting into his lifestyle and made radical changes to his life. So from Silicon Valley, techie, where does he live now? In the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Smoky Mountains, in the mountains. And so you'll see him. That's where he is. That's Blue Ridge Smoky Mountain water. He lives up in the Smokies. And he said he finally found his home where he truly feels belonged. The book, The Overtory, is a sweeping, impassioned work of stunning evocation of a hymn to the natural world. And he is trying to reimagine our relationship with the natural world before it's too late. Before it's too late. From the roots to the crowns and back to the seeds of these trees, Richard Powers' 12th novel, The Overtory, unfolds in concentric rings of interlocking fables of a handful of people who learn how to see the world of transcendent realities that range from antebellum New York to the late 20th century timber wars of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. The opener of the book is a gorgeous family saga with the texture of Ken Burns' documentary. The Overtory is a novel meant to tell us that humanity aren't the only show on earth. We are not the only show on earth. That in fact, we are not much more than a sneeze to a pine cone. So Richard Powers forces us to revisit the Western civilization notion of human exceptionalism, that we are better than everything else. In our culture of separatism, there is the belief that we can subdue the cycles of the biological world and turn them into our benefits, which we are able to do, without sometimes repercussion or without considering the consequences of our behavior, of dominating and exploiting. What has to break down is our sense that we can deform and force the living world to conform to our sense of maximum efficiency, maximum return on investments, and maximum benefit to us at the expense of these creatures and creation. There is a world alongside us, vast, slow, interconnected, resourceful, magnificently inventive, and almost invisible to us. The book offers us the world outside of humanity, operating on a different time scale than humanity. Next one. So the oratory gives us the tree's eye view. Tree's eye view of the world, of the planet, that can be plenty unnerving to humans. So if you read this book, you'll never see tree the same ever again. And you know, our trustee's been looking at the parking lot and resurfacing the parking lot back there. That's way overdue after over 30 years or so. And there's this big tree in the middle. You know, the tree that gives shades, where people compete to park where the shades are of that tree offers. And then there's a little other trees, you know, that are alongside that big mother tree. And so we're talking about me needing to uproot this and get rid of them because it's a damage to our parking lot. In the past, I would not have blinked an eye about it. Yeah, that makes sense. It still makes sense. But somehow, after reading this book, I mean, my capacity for empathy beyond humans have been expanding, and it's getting to my conscience. Looking at the tree, oh, sorry. Sorry. So, the meaning of compassion, you know the definition of compassion? It is to suffer with. To have compassion is to suffer with. And so a capacity to have empathy, to suffer with when someone else suffers. That's what compassion is. So I remember my mother, who has green thumb, and she would always give me this assignment of watering. And I would just like, don't go so fast. Let it drain and let it sink into the ground, then you move to the next one. You know, but as a kid, I just want to get it done so that she'll get me off my back so I can go and do my thing. And she will say when we went travel, you know, go camping or go family traveling, she'll come back and see all these parched plants. And she will say, oh, how thirsty they are. I could just feel their thirst and their pain and their suffering. And so she will quickly, that's the first thing she does, is when she comes back from any kind of trip, she'll go and before even going to the house, she'll just water these plants, because they said, they're like humans. I could feel them. I talk to them. And so she will water them. And so I think anybody who's a gardener and interacted nurturing plants, you know that these plants have feelings. You know, they have life. So power doesn't hesitate to give us widescreen view of the natural world, beyond anthropocentric view that humans are the center of the universe. So power helps readers to set reality through the lens of trees that's been alive since before Jesus. So these trees have so much wisdom beyond us. And trees do most of the things that you and I do, just more slowly, in longer stretch period of time. They struggle for their livelihoods, take care of their families, sometimes make huge sacrifices for their children. They breathe, eat, and have sex. They give gifts, communicate, learn, remember, and record the important events of their lives. You know, if you look at the rings of trees, can tell not only their age, but what events they went through for over 1,000 years. They tell the story. They have a memory. With relatives and non-kin alike, they cooperate, forming neighborhood watch committees, to name one example, with rapid response networks to alert others when there is a threatening intruder. Many, they manage their resource in bank accounts, using past market trends to predict future needs. They mine and farm the land and sometimes move their families across great distance for better opportunities. Some of this might take centuries, but for a creature with a lifespan of hundreds or thousands of years, time must surely have a different feel about it than us humans. There's a man who prayed to God for $1 million. And God answered, sure, just give me a second. And the man eagerly waits, and few seconds pass by, nothing happens. Few minutes pass by, nothing happens. And so finally man asks God, what is a second to you? And God answers, a second to me is 1 trillion years to you. For us humans, trees are things to us, good for tables, floors, ceiling beams. As much as we might admire them, we are still happy to walk on their hearts. It may register as a shock then that trees have lives as much like our own. That's a revelation to me. It's expanding my consciousness that these trees live like we do. All the behaviors described above have been studied and documented by scientists who carefully avoid the word behavior, quote unquote, and other anthropomorphizing language, lest they be accused of having emotional attachment to their subject that they're studying. The novelists, on the other hand, suffer no such limitations and injunctions. And most of them don't know a beat about botany, but not Richard Powers. he gave his dues in studying this topic. And he has no qualms about telling us what his finds are. Using the tools of story, he pulls readers' heart first into a perspective so much longer lived and more subtly developed than the human purview, that we gain glimpses of trees' vast, primordial sensibility and consciousness. But birds gotta fly and fish gotta swim. And people will only read stories about people and not really interested in non-human subjects. And Powers know that perfectly well. Trees are everywhere in his book, but incidental, it seems, until the seventh tale in the book about an odd little girl who loves trees more than she loves people and grows up to be a scientist, a forest ecologist to be specific. And this little girl becomes Dr. Pat Westerford, and she spent years alone in forests like that a woman who dedicated her life to studying chimpanzee. What's her name? James Goodall. She is the James Goodall of trees. So she's initially mocked by her peers, but eventually celebrated for an astounding discovery that she makes. And it's almost a parallel to the life of Dr. Suzanne Simard, whom I shared with you last Sunday, of her latest book, Finding the Mother Tree, Discovering the Wisdom of the Forest. So in the book, I think he borrowed from the research work of Dr. Simard, that forest trees are all communicating all the time via a nuanced chemical language transmitted from root to root. Standing overhead with outstretched limbs of these trees are the real protagonists in the book. Trees are the heroes and heroines. Trees bring these small lives of characters in the novel together into large acts of war, love, loyalty, and betrayal. Violent struggle against mortgaged timber company that is liquidating its assets, including one of the last virgin stands of California redwoods. The description of this deeply animate place, including a thunderstorm, is experienced from 300 feet up, stand with any prose that I have ever heard. He really brings that experience come alive when you read it. So the author invests immense effort in getting us into that primal forest to bear witness. We may agree that deforested continents and melting permafrost are the gravest assault we've ever committed against anything or anyone, but still tend to behave as if nothing really is happening. I believe Greta Thunberg, a young woman from Stockholm, Sweden, is the prophet of our time. Climate activists like Greta Thunberg and others are warning us about the unbelievable eradication of the old-growth forest across the entire world. The core theme of the Overtory is about the disconnect between the environmental horrors swirling around us and the way we act and behave. What's for dinner? Is the Louis Vuitton handbag sale coming on anytime soon? And climate change is the one here that is getting a lot of attention right now, and for good reason. And these species will not come back once they become extinct, which are happening in an accelerated rate. These forests maybe one day will grow back, but humanity has created a tremendous die-off. In Power's research for the book The Overtory, he learned to his astonishment that only like 95 to 98% of these primal forests have been cut. 95 to 98%. That's astonishing. And only 2 to 5% of these forests remain in something like their original ecological condition. Only 2 to 5%. There's a new book that's coming down the pipe called Evergreen, Saving Big Forests to Save the Planet. It is by the economist John Reed and the conservation biologist Thomas Lovejoy. As of now, there are only 5 remaining great primary forests left on Earth, which are some parts of North American redwood forests, taiga of the northeastern boreal, the Amazon, the Congo, and New Guinea. They make the case that these primary forests are keys to preserving biodiversity, indigenous cultures and their wisdoms, and also a stable climate. And the author presents a very clear-eyed, practical, and persuasive plan for how to save these forests, and maybe the rest of us in the process. And so I close with this words of plea from Lakota elder Joseph Marshall III when he was giving a message. I don't know exactly where. I don't know if it was a United Nation. I think that might be it, in 2019. And this is what Lakota elder Joseph Marshall III said. What is most important for people to understand is how we relate to other forms of life. We as human beings are no better or no worse than any other form of life. Whether it is a shrub or a bird or a snake or any other forms of life, we are equal because all of us are born into this life. We live our lives, fulfill our purposes, and then our lives end. And no creature, no form of life, especially us humans, can circumvent that one reality. That's what makes us all equal. We don't regard humans as having dominion over other creatures. We don't regard ourselves as being the one species that is in charge of all other species. We are no more and no less. That is the one reality that I think the world needs to understand in relationship to the earth. Most people do not accept that. They look at life from a different viewpoint. that has an impact on how we treat one another, how we treat other forms of life, and how we relate to the earth. I think if there is one thing that other people can learn from the Lakota, it is that understanding of inner connectivity, and that we share this one planet. Then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plant yielding seed, and fruit tree of every kind on earth that bears fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seeds of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruits. And God saw that it was good. Amen.